In the dead of winter, even silence can sound like a warning. Snow fell heavy that January afternoon in 1978, muffling every sound except the grind of chains on tires. The armored truck lumbered down Route 7, its headlights carving pale tunnels through the storm. Inside, 2 guards cursed the weather and dreamed of warm dinners waiting at home. They didn't know this trip would be their last. On a deserted stretch of road, a sedan sat sideways, hazard lights blinking. A man waved frantically, his face hidden by the blur of snow. The driver slowed, muttering, "Poor bastard stuck." That's when the shotgun blast shattered the windshield. The ambush was quick, brutal. 2 masked figures emerged from the trees, their boots crunching on ice. One was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the heavy certainty of a man who had nothing left to lose. The other was wiry, jittery, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Together, they yanked open the doors, dragged the guards out, and shoved them face first into the snow. "Keys," the tall one growled. The guard stammered, hands trembling, but he obeyed. The wiry man laughed, breath fogging the air. "Just like that, easy as pie." The back of the truck opened with a metallic groan. Inside lay the prize, canvas bags stuffed with cash, payroll for 3 counties. The tall man's chest tightened at the sight, not with greed, but with grim resolve. He hefted a bag onto his shoulder. Every muscle screamed, but he kept moving. As they loaded the sedan, the wiry man couldn't resist. "Eddie, we're going to be kings. No more begging, no more scraping." Eddie Callahan froze at the sound of his name. He shot the other man a hard look. "Shut your mouth, Tommy. Names will hang us quicker than bullets." But it was too late. The guard on the ground had heard. He lifted his head, eyes wide, lips trembling as though memorizing every detail. Eddie saw it, and for a moment his soul quaked. "Don't," he muttered, voice hoarse. "Please don't make this worse." Tommy raised his shotgun. The crack of the blast rolled across the snowy hills. The guard went limp. Eddie's stomach dropped. His hands shook as he shoved the last bag into the car. "You fool! You damn fool!" Tommy only grinned, teeth flashing white in the storm. "Can't leave loose ends, partner." They sped off, tires skidding across ice, leaving the armored truck smoldering in the storm. Eddie's breath came hard, fogging the inside of his mask. He could already feel the weight of the money like a curse. By nightfall, word spread through the mill town of Franklin. At Murphy's diner, men spoke in hushed tones, forks clinking against plates. At the church, whispers floated through the pews. $1 million gone. Guards dead in the snow. Detective Helen Monroe stood in the sheriff's office, watching the storm batter the windows. Her gray eyes were sharp, her voice steady as she spoke to the deputy. "This isn't the work of strangers. Not in a town like this. These men are local." Meanwhile, in a small house at the edge of town, Margaret Callahan set the table for dinner. She glanced at the clock, her heart uneasy. Eddie was late again. Their son Sean sat slouched at the table, textbooks open but unread. "Storm's getting bad," Margaret murmured, forcing calm into her voice. "Your father should have been home by now." Sean shrugged, though his eyes betrayed worry. "He's probably just helping someone with the plow." Outside, the wind howled like a warning. The sound of tires crunching in the driveway made Margaret jump. Eddie stumbled through the door, snow clinging to his coat, eyes wild. He kissed her forehead too quickly, avoided her gaze, and set a duffel bag heavily on the floor by the stairs. Sean frowned. "What's in the bag, Dad?" Eddie swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Tools, just tools." But when Margaret leaned closer, she smelled gunpowder in his hair. Upstairs, as Eddie dragged the duffel into the bedroom, a bundle of cash slipped out onto the floorboards. Margaret froze. Her husband, the man she thought she knew, had just brought the robbery of the century into her home. Sometimes the heaviest burden isn't money, it's the secret you carry with it. Margaret Callahan stared at the bundle of bills on the floor, edges crisp and green, like something from a dream that had curdled into a nightmare. Eddie bent quickly, snatched it up and shoved it back inside the duffel before she could speak. Their eyes met. His were pleading, desperate. Hers, wide with disbelief. "Don't," Eddie whispered, voice ragged. "Not a word." Margaret's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but Sean's footsteps on the stairs froze her tongue. Their son poked his head into the hall. "Everything okay?" Eddie forced a smile. "Fine, son. Just clumsy me. Dropped something." Sean frowned but retreated. Margaret turned back to Eddie, her voice low and fierce. "What did you do?" Eddie ran a hand through his damp hair, snow melting into rivulets. "It wasn't supposed to go like that. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. But Tommy, he pulled the trigger." Margaret's chest constricted. "My God, Eddie." He reached for her hands, but she pulled away. "Listen to me," he begged. This money, it'll save us. The mill's dead. The bills, the mortgage. We've been drowning. Now we can breathe again. We just have to keep quiet." Margaret backed into the wall, her heart pounding. "And what about the blood on it? You think it won't follow us? You think Sean won't see it in your eyes?" Eddie's jaw tightened. For the first time, his voice hardened. "I did this for us. For him. You think I wanted this? You think I had a choice?" The silence between them was thick, suffocating. Upstairs, Sean shut his bedroom door, oblivious to the storm brewing inside his home. At the sheriff's office, Detective Helen Monroe spread a county map across the desk. Snowflakes clung to her coat as she leaned over the red markers. "Ambush here. Escape route likely down Route 12. Locals know that stretch better than outsiders," she said. Her deputy nodded, scribbling notes. Helen tapped the map. "Mark my words. The men who did this live here, and sooner or later Franklin will give them away. People can't keep secrets this big." She'd worked robberies before, but this one felt different. Personal. The brutality of it, the recklessness. It wasn't the work of seasoned professionals. It reeked of desperation. That night, Margaret lay awake, listening to Eddie's uneven breathing beside her. She thought of the money stuffed into their closet, the lives lost in the snow. She remembered Eddie's strong hands, once blackened with mill dust, now shaking from sins she couldn't wash away. She closed her eyes, praying for silence, for time to stop. But even in the dark, she knew, secrets rot, and this one would poison them all. Down the hall, Sean couldn't sleep either. He'd seen the way his mother's face had changed when Eddie came home, the way she looked at the duffel bag. His gut told him something wasn't right. The wind rattled the windows. Somewhere in town, dogs barked in the night. Sean rolled over, staring at the ceiling. What's Dad hiding? By morning, the town buzzed with news. The diner was packed, voices low, eyes darting to strangers. "Million gone, 2 men dead." They say the robbers knew the route, knew the schedule. Sean sat at the counter with his friends, trying to act normal, but he couldn't stop thinking about the duffel bag. His father's haunted look replayed in his mind. At a booth nearby, Detective Monroe sipped her coffee, scanning faces, listening. Every word spoken in that diner was a thread, and she intended to pull until one unraveled. Margaret, meanwhile, scrubbed the kitchen floor until her knees ached. She kept glancing at the closet, as if the money might burst out on its own. When Eddie came in, his smile was brittle. "Breakfast?" he asked. She didn't answer. She only looked at him, eyes burning with a question she could not say aloud. How long before the truth breaks through these walls? That evening, Sean sneaked into his parents' room while they argued downstairs. He opened the closet, tugged the zipper on the duffel, and his heart stopped at the sight of stacks of cash. His father's secret was no longer hidden. Nothing changes a boy faster than discovering his father is a criminal. Sean Callahan's hands trembled as he touched the stacks of cash. He had never seen so much money in his life. Bundles upon bundles, tightly wrapped, marked with bank stamps. His chest tightened, his mind spinning. He heard his parents, voices downstairs, muffled but tense. His father's tone was sharp, defensive, his mother's, weary and cutting. Sean zipped the duffel back shut, but the image was seared into his brain. When he came down, Eddie was at the table, a cigarette dangling between his fingers. Margaret's eyes flicked to Sean, searching his face. She seemed to know. Sean dropped into a chair, trying to sound casual. "Dad, where'd all that money come from?" Eddie froze. The silence stretched. Margaret stiffened, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. Finally, Eddie exhaled smoke, slow and heavy. "You went snooping where you shouldn't have, son." Sean's voice cracked. "It's from the robbery, isn't it? The one everyone's talking about." Margaret closed her eyes, as if the words themselves cut her open. Eddie ground out the cigarette. Listen to me, Sean. Everything I've ever done, everything, has been to put food on this table, to give you a chance. You think I wanted this? The mill's gone. Nobody's hiring. We had nothing left. Sean stared at him, the image of his father as a proud, honest man collapsing. People died, Dad. Eddie's face hardened. That wasn't me. That was Tommy. I told him no blood. He didn't listen. Margaret's voice cut in, sharp with pain. And yet you carried the money home. Sean's stomach churned. He wanted to run, to scream, but instead he whispered, What if the police find out? Eddie leaned forward, his gaze fierce. They won't. Not if we keep our mouths shut. This is survival, son. You'll understand one day. But Sean wasn't sure he wanted to understand. Across town, Detective Helen Monroe pinned newspaper clippings on the bulletin board in her cramped office. Photos of the crime scene. Blood in the snow, the armored truck, tire tracks fading into whiteness, stared back at her. She tapped her pencil against her teeth. This wasn't professional. Too sloppy. Too messy. Which means local men. Desperate men. Her deputy nodded. Half the town's desperate since the mill shut down. Helen narrowed her eyes. And one of them's about to make a mistake. Watch the spending. Somebody's going to slip. That night, Sean lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling. The sound of the wind outside felt like whispers he couldn't ignore. He thought of the guards, faceless men lying dead in the snow. He thought of his father, hands trembling, eyes hollow. And he thought of Margaret, holding the family together with silence that seemed ready to shatter. The next morning, Sean skipped school. He walked aimlessly through the snow-dusted streets, ending up at Murphy's Diner. His friends laughed, chattered, but Sean sat quiet, distant. From her corner booth, Detective Monroe noticed. Teenagers didn't usually carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. She watched the boy, filing away the sight. Back home, Margaret tried to confront Eddie again. We can't keep this here, Eddie. It's like burying a corpse under our floorboards. It will destroy us. Eddie's eyes flashed with anger, then softened with something like despair. Where else am I supposed to put it? We can't trust anyone. You think Tommy won't come sniffing around? The police? Hell, even neighbors would turn us in for a cut. Margaret pressed her fist to her temples. You've brought the storm right into our house. Eddie touched her arm. Just a little longer. Let things cool down. Then we'll figure out how to wash it clean. But Margaret couldn't shake the image of Sean's pale face. Their son carried the secret now too, and secrets were heavy enough to break a boy's back. That evening, Sean sat at his desk, staring at his textbooks. His hands clenched, his mind racing. He wanted to believe his father's words, that this was for survival. But another voice whispered louder, A man is dead. And Dad is part of it. He slammed the book shut, breathing hard. His childhood was slipping away like sand through his fingers. At that same moment, Tommy Russo, the wiry ex-con with a reckless grin, parked his rusted Chevy outside the Callahan house. He lit a cigarette, smoke curling into the cold night. Time to visit my old friend Eddie, he muttered, eyes glinting. Sometimes the past doesn't knock politely. It barges back in, demanding its share. The knock came just after dusk. It was sharp, insistent, the kind of knock that carried weight. Margaret stiffened at the kitchen sink, her hands wet with dishwater. Eddie froze in his chair, staring at the front door as though he already knew who stood behind it. Sean glanced up from his homework. Dad? Eddie swallowed hard, then rose. Stay here. He opened the door just a crack, but Tommy Russo didn't wait for an invitation. He shoved it wide, striding into the warm glow of the Callahan living room like a man who owned the place. His wiry frame was wrapped in a frayed leather jacket, his eyes sharp and restless. Well, well, Tommy drawled, tossing his cigarette butt into the snow before shutting the door. Cozy little family scene? Margaret's heart sank. Eddie tried to block him, but Tommy clapped a hand on his shoulder, grinning with menace. Relax, Eddie. I just came by for a visit. Sean stared, wide-eyed. Who's this? Tommy winked. Name's Tommy, old pal of your dad's. Margaret's voice was cold. Old pal, or the one who pulled the trigger? The grin faltered, but only for a moment. Tommy's eyes flicked to Sean, then back to Eddie. You told her? She figured it out, Eddie muttered. Tommy chuckled, low and dark. Smart woman, smarter than you, Eddie. He leaned closer. But smart folks also know when to keep their mouths shut. Sean shifted uncomfortably. Eddie snapped. Sean, upstairs, now. Sean hesitated, his gaze locked on Tommy's sly smirk, but Margaret's hand pushed him gently. Go, sweetheart. When Sean's footsteps faded, Eddie turned on Tommy, voice low and angry. What the hell are you doing here? Tommy's tone dropped its playfulness. You've got the bag, don't you? Don't look so shocked. You think I didn't notice it missing? I want my share. Eddie clenched his fists. We said we'd lay low. You bring heat to my doorstep, you're signing our death warrants. Tommy shrugged. Heat's already here, my friend. Cops are sniffing. You think they won't start knocking soon? Best thing to do is cut and run, with the cash. I can move it, clean it. You and me, we split it proper. Margaret stepped forward, her voice shaking with fury. Get out! You've brought nothing but ruin. My son will not grow up watching this poison eat us alive. Tommy's grin returned, sharper this time. Lady, poison's already in your walls. Might as well make it worth something. The tension was thick, heavy enough to choke. Eddie stood between them, sweat beading on his forehead. His loyalty wavered, between his partner in crime and the family he swore to protect. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Inside, 3 lives teetered on the edge of a choice that could never be undone. At that very moment, Detective Helen Monroe was leaving Murphy's diner. She pulled her coat tighter, her sharp eyes scanning the quiet street. Her gut whispered that someone, somewhere, was about to make a mistake. She didn't know yet that it was already happening in the Callahan living room. Upstairs, Sean pressed his ear to the floorboards, straining to hear. Words like bag, cash, and run filtered up, his stomach twisted. He understood now. His father wasn't just caught in something bad. He was chained to a man who would drag them all down. He sat back, trembling. Should he tell someone? Could he? If he did, he'd destroy his father. If he didn't, he'd lose him anyway. Downstairs, Eddie tried to steady his voice. Tommy, you can't stay here. Not tonight. Not ever. If the cops see you sniffing around, it's over. Tommy smirked. Then you'd better make up your mind fast. You know where to find me. But don't keep me waiting. He strode to the door, pulling it open. Cold air rushed in as he glanced back, eyes glinting. Clock's ticking, Eddie. Tick-tock. The door slammed shut, leaving silence behind. Margaret's hands trembled as she turned to Eddie. What are you going to do? Eddie didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the closet, pulled out the duffel, and set it on the table. The question, he said slowly, his voice hollow, is what happens to us if I don't give him what he wants. Families aren't destroyed all at once. They splinter, piece by piece, until the weight of secrets crushes them. The duffel bag sat in the middle of the table like a bomb. No one touched it. No one spoke. The air in the Callahan home was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. Margaret broke the silence first. You can't give him that money, Eddie. The second you do, he'll bleed you dry. That's what men like Tommy do. They take and take until there's nothing left. Eddie's jaw tightened. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, weary. You think I don't know that? But what choice do we have? If I don't pay him, he'll come back. And this time, maybe he won't be so friendly. Sean sat at the top of the stairs, listening, every word carved deeper into him. Margaret's voice was sharp, filled with a quiet rage. There's always a choice. You chose this. You brought his poison into our lives. And now you want to tell me we're trapped? I won't accept that. Eddie slammed his fist against the table. The sound echoed through the house. You think I wanted any of this? I was trying to keep us alive. Sean flinched. He couldn't take it anymore. He came down the stairs, pale and tense. What if we go to the police? Both parents froze, staring at him. Eddie's eyes burned. Don't ever say that again. Margaret whispered, Sean. But Sean pressed on, voice trembling but fierce. Dad, you said this was for us, for me, but what kind of life is this? I hear you fighting, Mom crying, some criminal knocking on our door. What happens when he kills you, or all of us? Eddie stood, towering over his son. You don't understand the world, boy. You think the cops care about us? You think they'll give a damn about some mill worker's family? They'll throw me in a cell and leave you and your mother with nothing. Sean's throat tightened, but he stood his ground. At least we'd still have each other. The words hung heavy. Eddie's face softened for a moment, but then he turned away, pacing like a trapped animal. Across town, Detective Helen Monroe spread reports across her desk. Bank withdrawals, new cars, sudden spending. She was watching every penny in that town. But something else had caught her attention. The Callahan's boy. She spoke quietly to her deputy. That kid at the diner yesterday. His eyes were haunted. Too young for that. Too knowing. Her deputy frowned. Sean Callahan, he's just 16. Good student, not the type. Helen tapped her pen against her notebook. Sometimes the kids see more than they should, and sometimes they're the crack that lets the light in. She wrote down the name Callahan and underlined it twice. Back at the Callahans, Margaret found Sean in his room, sitting in the dark. She sat beside him, her hand brushing his shoulder. "You were brave to speak up," she whispered. "Your father's lost right now, but don't you lose yourself, Sean. Promise me." Sean's eyes brimmed with tears he wouldn't let fall. "I don't know what to do, Mom. If I stay quiet, Dad gets swallowed by this. If I say something, I destroy him." Margaret's voice cracked. "Sometimes love means holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. I don't know which this is." Sean looked at her, desperate. "Do you still love him?" She hesitated too long. That night, Eddie sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the duffel. He poured himself a whiskey, then another. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Hard, tired, beaten. Tommy's voice echoed in his head. "Clock's ticking, Eddie. Tick-tock." Margaret's echoed too. "You've brought the storm right into our house." And Sean's, "At least we'd still have each other." The words collided, tearing him apart. He pressed his hands over his face, shaking. For the first time, he wondered if survival had already cost him the very thing he claimed he was saving. But outside, under the cover of night, Tommy Russo wasn't waiting patiently. He prowled near the Callahan home, cigarette glowing in the dark, eyes fixed on the house like a predator. From his upstairs window, Sean spotted the flicker of Tommy's cigarette in the shadows. His heart slammed against his ribs. He's watching us, Sean realized. And he's not going away. Danger doesn't always strike. It lingers, waits, and poisons every breath with fear. Sean couldn't move. He crouched at his bedroom window, staring at the tiny orange glow in the darkness. The cigarette burned down, vanished. Then another spark appeared a few feet away. Tommy Russo was out there, pacing like a wolf, watching, waiting. Sean's fists clenched. He wanted to scream, to wake his father, to call the police, but he froze, caught between terror and fury. Finally, he crept down the stairs. Margaret was asleep on the couch, exhaustion written across her face. Eddie was still at the table, his head bowed, whiskey glass empty. Sean touched his father's shoulder. "Dad!" Eddie stirred. "What is it?" "He's outside, Tommy. He's out there right now." Eddie's bloodshot eyes flicked toward the window. His face hardened. "Stay here." Margaret stirred awake as Eddie reached for the baseball bat by the door. "Eddie? What's happening?" He didn't answer. He stepped outside into the bitter cold. Tommy leaned against a telephone pole, grinning when he saw Eddie. "Evening, partner." Eddie tightened his grip on the bat. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Keeping an eye on my investment," Tommy said casually, flicking his cigarette into the snow. "Wouldn't want you getting any funny ideas about hiding that money. You're putting my family in danger." Tommy smirked. "Newsflash, Eddie. You are the danger. Without me, you'd be just another broke mill hand. You wanted more. You wanted out. That duffel's your ticket. Don't go blaming me now." Eddie raised the bat slightly. "If you come near this house again." Tommy laughed, sharp and cruel. "Or what? You'll swing that bat at me? Don't forget, Eddie, I know things. I know what happened that night. If I go down, you're coming with me." For a long, taut moment, they stared each other down, the cold air biting at their faces. Then Tommy leaned in, his voice low. "You've got 48 hours. Either you cut me in, or I'll make sure the whole world finds out what you've been hiding." He turned and walked away, whistling a tune that echoed down the empty street. Inside, Margaret rushed to Eddie. "What did he say?" Eddie dropped the bat, his shoulders slumping. "He's giving me 2 days." Sean's voice broke. "And then what?" Eddie didn't answer. His silence was enough. Meanwhile, Detective Helen Monroe was going over a map of the town. Each pin represented a suspect, a lead, a loose thread. She circled the Callahan house. Something about the boy's haunted stare at the diner wouldn't leave her mind. Her deputy noticed. "You really think a millworker's family has anything to do with that heist?" Helen's lips pressed thin. "I think people are capable of more than you'd expect when they're desperate enough, and I've seen desperation before." She closed the folder. "Tomorrow we pay the Callahans a visit." Back at the house, Sean lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The walls felt too thin, the night too loud. His father was breaking, his mother was slipping away, and now a dangerous man circled their home like a vulture. Sean whispered to himself, somebody has to stop him. Somebody has to tell the truth. He didn't know if he meant Tommy or his own father. At dawn, Margaret found Eddie sitting outside on the porch, the duffel at his feet. His eyes were red, his face gray with exhaustion. "You're killing yourself," she said softly. Eddie shook his head. "I'm already dead, Maggie. Just trying to buy you and Sean a little more time." Margaret's heart broke. She reached for him, but he pulled away, ashamed. A knock at the door startled them both. This time, it wasn't Tommy. It was Detective Helen Monroe, her badge glinting in the morning light. Truth is a blade. Sometimes it cuts clean, and sometimes it carves a family apart. The knock echoed through the Callahan house like a warning. Margaret froze. Eddie rose slowly from the porch chair, duffel at his feet, his face pale as ash. Sean peeked around the corner of the living room, his stomach twisting. He saw the figure framed in the doorway, Detective Helen Monroe. Her posture was steady, her expression unreadable, but her presence alone carried weight. "Morning," she said, lifting her badge. "Detective Monroe, I'd like to ask you folks a few questions." Eddie tried to keep his voice even. "About what?" Helen's eyes flicked over him, then into the house where she caught Sean's anxious face. "Mind if I come in?" Margaret stepped forward quickly. "Of course, Detective. Please." She pushed the door wider before Eddie could protest. Inside, Helen placed a small notebook on the table. She didn't sit until they did, a quiet assertion of control. Sean slipped into a chair, his palms damp. Helen looked at Eddie first. "There was a robbery. You've heard about it, I'm sure. Money's still missing. Dangerous men looking to claim it." Eddie gave a stiff nod. "We've heard talk." Helen's gaze shifted to Margaret. "I've been looking at bank withdrawals, spending patterns. Sometimes stolen money surfaces in small ways. New appliances, cars, cash transactions. Ever notice anyone around here suddenly living larger than they should?" Margaret shook her head. "Not in this town. Folks here barely scrape by. No one's buying Cadillacs." Helen studied her for a long beat. "And you? Any sudden windfalls?" Eddie leaned forward, bristling. "Are you accusing us of something?" Helen's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm just asking questions, Mr. Callahan. That's all." Sean's throat tightened. He could feel his father's anger rising, his mother's nerves unraveling. The silence stretched too long. Finally, Sean blurted, "We don't have any money." Helen's eyes settled on him. "I never said you did." The boy flushed, realizing too late what he'd given away. Not proof, but pressure, the kind detectives notice. Helen's pen scratched across her notebook. Margaret quickly intervened. "Detective, we're just trying to keep our heads above water. Eddie works every hour the mill gives him. Sean helps at the diner. We're not the kind of people you're looking for." Helen gave her a small nod, but her eyes returned to Eddie. "Sometimes good people get caught in bad situations. That's what I'm really looking for, the ones caught in between." Eddie's jaw clenched. "We've got nothing to do with any of that." Helen stood, closing her notebook. "I hope that's true, for your family's sake." She walked toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. If a man named Tommy Russo comes around, don't engage with him. He's dangerous." The name dropped like a stone in the room. Eddie's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Margaret's lips parted, but she said nothing. Sean's pulse raced. Helen glanced at them, reading every flicker in their eyes. Then she left, the screen door creaking shut behind her. Silence. Margaret whispered, "She knows." Eddie's voice was hoarse. "No, she suspects. There's a difference." Sean turned to his father, desperate. "She can help us, Dad. Don't you see? If Tommy's dangerous." "Enough," Eddie snapped, slamming his fist on the table. "You think the cops are here to save us? They'll lock me up and leave you both to starve. That's the truth." Margaret closed her eyes, her voice trembling. "Maybe prison would be safer than Tommy Russo breathing down our necks." The words struck Eddie harder than a blow. He stared at her, betrayal etched deep. That night, Eddie sat alone on the porch again, the duffel at his feet, a cigarette burning between his fingers. His mind churned. The walls were closing in, Tommy on one side, Helen Monroe on the other, and his own family pulling away. From across the street, headlights appeared. A black car rolled to a stop. The driver's door opened, and Tommy Russo stepped out, smiling as if he owned the night. Choices made in the dark rarely stay hidden when the sun rises. The black car idled at the curb, its exhaust puffing white into the frozen night. Tommy Russo stepped out slowly, savoring the cold air, his grin cutting through the dark. Eddie stayed on the porch, cigarette trembling between his fingers. "What do you want now, Tommy?" Tommy shoved his hands into his coat pockets, strolling up the walk as if he owned the place. "Relax, Eddie. Just thought I'd stop by. We've got business to settle." Margaret appeared in the doorway, her voice sharp. "Not here, not in front of my house." Tommy tipped an imaginary hat. "Evening, Mrs. Callahan. Lovely place you've got here. Be a shame if folks started whispering about where the money came from." Margaret stiffened, her face blanching. Sean appeared behind her, fists clenched. "Get off our property." Tommy chuckled. "Fiery kid, takes after his old man." Then his eyes turned back to Eddie. "Here's the deal. You've got 24 hours. Hand over my cut, or I start talking to people you don't want knocking on your door." Eddie's voice was low, strained. "And if I don't?" Tommy leaned in close, his breath a cloud in the cold. "Then your pretty little family finds out what happens to folks who cross me. And believe me, Eddie, prison will sound like a vacation compared to what I can do." He straightened, brushing invisible snow from his coat. "Midnight tomorrow, my place. Don't be late." Without waiting for an answer, he slid back into his car. The headlights flared, and the black vehicle vanished into the night. Inside, Margaret spun on Eddie, her voice breaking. "This ends now. You're not dragging us any deeper." Eddie dropped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "You think I wanted this? You think I planned for a man like Tommy to be chained to me?" "You chose this," she shot back. "Every dollar in that bag is blood money, and if you don't see that, then maybe you're not the man I married." Sean's voice cracked, raw with desperation. "Dad, just give it back. Let him take it. We don't need it." Eddie lifted his head, eyes hollow. "You don't understand. If I give it to him, he'll bleed me forever. There's no walking away once you hand a man like Tommy Russo power." Margaret shook her head. "Then what? You'll kill him? Is that where this ends?" The question hung heavy. Eddie didn't answer. Meanwhile, Detective Monroe sat at her desk, reviewing her notes. Tommy Russo's name circled again and again in her files. She'd chased him for years, never catching more than shadows. But now there was something in the Callahan's eyes, something fragile, something tied to Russo. She closed the folder. "Tomorrow, I press harder." Her deputy looked uneasy. "You think Eddie Callahan's dangerous?" Helen's gaze was distant, steady. "I think he's a man standing on the edge of a cliff. And when men like that fall, they don't fall alone." Back in the Callahan house, night stretched long. Eddie sat at the kitchen table, staring at the duffel bag. Margaret retreated upstairs without a word, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Sean stayed hidden on the stairs, watching his father, torn between fear and love. Finally, he whispered, "You can still stop this, Dad." Eddie looked up, his face worn, his eyes shadowed. "It's too late, son." At dawn, Eddie loaded the duffel into his truck. Sean watched from his bedroom window as his father drove off, not to work, but toward Tommy Russo's place. Violence doesn't just shatter lives, it stains everything it touches, even the snow. The morning sun rose weak and pale, throwing long shadows across the frozen fields. Eddie's truck rattled down the empty back road, the duffel bag on the seat beside him like a silent passenger. His grip on the wheel was tight, his breath shallow. Tommy Russo's cabin sat at the edge of the woods, smoke curling from its chimney. Eddie parked, shut off the engine and stepped out into the biting air. The snow crunched beneath his boots. Tommy emerged from the porch with a cigarette dangling from his lips. His grin was cruel. On time. Didn't think you had it in you. Eddie dropped the duffel at his feet. Take it, we're finished. Tommy's eyes glinted. Finished? No, Eddie. This. He nudged the bag with his boot. This is just the start. From now on, every job I run, you're in. That's the price for keeping your family breathing. Eddie's chest heaved. No more. I did this once, and it's killing us. Tommy flicked ash into the snow. Then maybe your boy learns the business. Sean, isn't it? Strong kid. Bet he'd be useful. Rage flared hot in Eddie's chest. His hand darted inside his coat, steel cold against his palm. Tommy's smile widened. There it is. I wondered when you'd find your courage. The next moments were chaos. Eddie raised the pistol, his hands trembling. Tommy moved quick, drawing his own. 2 shots cracked, tearing the silence apart. Eddie stumbled back, clutching his side, crimson blooming through his coat. Tommy swore, a graze cutting his arm. They circled in the snow, breath steaming, guns still raised. You'll never walk away, Tommy hissed. Men like us, we're bound to this. Eddie's voice was raw. I'm nothing like you. The gunfire came again, 3 sharp bursts. Eddie's aim, wild but desperate, found its mark. Tommy staggered, eyes wide in shock. He fell back into the snow, red spreading across the white. Silence. Only Eddie's ragged breathing filled the air. He dropped the pistol, falling to his knees. Pain seared his side, but it was the weight in his chest that nearly crushed him. Back at the Callahan house, Margaret was pacing when Sean burst through the door, snow still clinging to his boots. Mom, Dad's truck's gone. He left early. Her face drained of color. Where? I think. Tommy's place. Margaret grabbed her coat. We're going. Detective Monroe's radio crackled in her cruiser as she drove the county roads. A local farmer reported hearing gunshots near the woods. Her gut tightened. Russo, she muttered, turning the wheel hard. By the time Margaret and Sean arrived at the cabin, the snow was marred with blood. Eddie stood there swaying, clutching his side, his face ashen. Sean shouted, rushing forward. Dad! Margaret's scream caught in her throat when she saw the body half buried in red snow. Tommy Russo lay still, his lifeless eyes staring skyward. Eddie looked at them both, guilt etched deep in every line of his face. I had no choice. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Margaret's voice trembled. They'll take you away. Eddie shook his head weakly. No, this time I tell the truth. As Detective Monroe's cruiser skidded to a stop at the cabin, Eddie dropped to his knees in the snow, raising his hands, not knowing if he'd face mercy or the end of everything he'd tried to protect. The cold doesn't just freeze the earth, it crystallizes truths long buried. Eddie sat in the back of Detective Monroe's cruiser, his hands cuffed, the snow still clinging to his coat. The warmth of the car did nothing to thaw the chill that ran through him. Outside, the world was white, silent, and unforgiving. Margaret approached cautiously, Sean clinging to her side. Their faces were masks of fear, relief, and heartbreak all at once. Detective Monroe opened the rear door. Mrs. Callahan, you should stay back. Margaret's voice was steady but soft. I'm not leaving him alone, not now. Eddie turned his head, the lines of pain on his face etched deeper by the fluorescent light inside the cruiser. I did what I had to do to keep you safe. I thought I could protect us all. Margaret's eyes glistened. Protect? Eddie, you've been carrying this weight alone, and it nearly crushed us, nearly destroyed everything. Sean, still trembling, whispered, Dad, why didn't you tell us? Eddie looked down, guilt pressing against his chest like a stone. I thought I could handle it. Thought I could keep Tommy from dragging us under. I never wanted you to see this side of me. Monroe cleared her throat. Eddie, the law will decide your fate now, but your family, they need the truth and they need each other. Eddie nodded faintly, exhaustion in every movement. I just want them safe. That's all I ever wanted. At the precinct, the interrogation room was cold, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Eddie faced questions with a grim composure, recounting every detail. Tommy's threats, the duffel bag, the confrontation in the snow. Detective Monroe listened quietly, occasionally scribbling notes. There was no celebration in her eyes, only the weight of reality. You killed him in self-defense, she said finally. But the investigation will be thorough, and the truth will come out. The law has to follow its course. Eddie exhaled slowly. I understand. I just hope my family survives this winter, with their hearts intact. Outside, Margaret and Sean walked through the snow-covered streets back home. The world was quiet, deceptively peaceful. Margaret took Sean's hand, squeezing it. We'll get through this, she said. We have to. For him, for us. Sean nodded, though his eyes betrayed the storm inside. I don't know if I can forgive him fully. Margaret's voice softened. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, Sean. It's about surviving. It's about choosing love when everything else screams despair. Weeks passed. Eddie was released on bail, the case still moving through the courts. The media had caught wind of the confrontation with Tommy Russo, painting a sensational story, but Margaret kept Sean shielded from the worst of it. The family returned to a fragile normalcy. Snow melted, leaving muddy streets and bare trees, symbols of scars slowly healing. Eddie, once the strong, silent protector, now moved through the house with a different awareness. Every look at Margaret, every smile at Sean, carrying the weight of someone who had seen darkness up close and returned. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eddie and Margaret stood side by side at the edge of their backyard. Sean built a small snowman nearby, laughter echoing faintly in the distance. Eddie broke the silence. We've survived the worst winter of our lives. I'm grateful, and I'm sorry for everything I couldn't say before. Margaret rested her head lightly on his shoulder. We're still standing. That counts for something, Eddie. That counts for everything. Life had tested the Callahans with blood, betrayal, and fear. But in the fragile warmth of family, even the coldest winter could be endured. Justice would run its course. Secrets had been revealed, and the truth, however painful, had finally emerged. The last snow fell quietly that night, blanketing the world in white, a silent testament to survival, love, and the heavy cost of protecting what mattered most.